Salute, my Quick Classics friends. Welcome back to another episode of Quick Classics. If you like the content, please click a like, subscribe, and share. And today we'll be talking about the Sol Invictus, or rather the Sol Invictus cult, which is kind of a follow-up to the Saturnalia episode that I did on the um, our last meeting. Now, the Sol Invictus uh, was a Roman deity of the later Roman Empire. It literally meant the unconquered sun. Um, and it was popular throughout the Dominate period, the later Roman period. And if you're interested in some background information about the later Roman Empire, I actually do have a Quick Classics lecture on the Dominate, which I'll put a link to in the description if you want to get a little bit of background about what's going on. Kind of a tumultuous transitional period in the 3rd century. At any rate, the Sol Invictus cult was pretty widespread, and in fact conflated with a number of other solar religions in the Roman Empire at the time. Now, again, there's a debate as to whether this is an original Roman religion. Does it go back to the Roman god Sol, the sun god, or is this epiphenomenal of the popularity of Eastern religions? Now, when I say Eastern and Oriental, I'm talking about, of course, the ancient Near East at that time, the Roman Near East. And there were a number of solar cults, most notably Mithraism, which were making their inroads. There was all kinds of Eastern influence on the Roman Empire at this time. When you consider that the very period of the later Roman Empire, from the late 3rd century on, or mid 3rd century on, is referred to as the Dominate. The reason being is that the emperors used the title Dominus, or Lord, which was an Eastern Oriental title. In the Again, if you track the history of Rome at this time, the court, the Roman capital, is moving steadily eastward until it ends up, of course, in Constantinople. Not that Rome proper is not an important political center anymore. It's just that the empire is bifurcating. It's splitting at this time. So, but again, I'll put a link in the description to my Dominate lecture. But getting back to the Sol Invictus cult, uh, it's an immensely popular religion, and in AD 274, the Emperor Aurelian basically passes an edict that, or issues an edict that puts it on an equal footing with other Roman religions. That is the cult of the Sol Invictus. He does puts it on equal footing with the other Roman religions and the mystery religions and all of the various cults that are at play in the panoply of Roman religion during that day. Um, Now, as far as looking at a sort of evolution or development of how the Sol Invictus cult became part of Roman culture at this time, we have to look at the actions of a number of emperors, not the least of which was Aurelian that I mentioned a minute ago. But there are some other emperors even before Aurelian, such as Elagabalus, who was one of the Eastern emperors, and I say Eastern, he was Syrian ethnically. That were long past the point of the Julio-Claudian emperors. Were there any ties to the family of Julius Caesar? And so there are other dynasties and families at play, and that of Elagabalus was a Syrian dynasty, and he is emperor from 218 to 222. And what's interesting about him is he was the devotee of this Syrian solar deity, which just happened to have the same name as him, Elagabalus. And so there, he being a devotee of that, sort of ensconced more Eastern influence on the Roman cult to Sol that existed before long before, in fact, the third century. Um, Now, the Sol Invictus cult is also very popular amongst the military, and in this capacity, it is it's usually conflated with Mithraism. Now, Mithras was an Eastern, Persian solar deity um, whose cult gradually made its way into the heart of Rome, and as I said, generally became conflated with Sol Invictus. This, of course, is not without precedent. There were all kinds of deities from the East who were conflated with Roman gods. And that is the case with Mithraism. So anytime you hear or read about the Sol Invictus cult and Mithraism, there's a lot of overlapping and conflation. Um, the The day that the Sol Invictus was celebrated was December the 25th, close to the winter solstice, which also coincided with the birthday of Mithras, this Eastern solar deity. And so again, there's some grafting on, some cultural diffusive activity that's actually happening there because of these alignments, as it were. Now, in terms of sources about the Sol Invictus cult, it's well tested in epigraphy, the inscriptions. There's statuary that we can follow. The coinage of that beginning of that period in the third century into the fourth century. As I said, the coinage is there. There are works like the Historia Augusta that talk about the cult. And interestingly enough, as I pointed out in regards to the Saturnalia, there are early Christian sources that talk about the cult of the Sol Invictus. Um, Generally, as part of some apologetic work that they're writing or polemic against paganism. One of the interesting early Christian sources is Augustine. Not first 3 centuries of Christ, but he's still an early Christian source. Augustine, what's interesting here is that Augustine is writing about the cult of the Sol Invictus in the early 5th century AD. So we know that it was still being practiced even after Christianity was, quote unquote, the official religion of the Roman Empire, at least given tolerance because of the actions of probably the emperor that is most associated, the most famous or infamous, as the case may be, associated with the cult of the Sol Invictus, and that was the Emperor Constantine. Constantine was a thorough devotee of the Sol Invictus cult, ostensibly until his conversion. And now, scholars debate, of course, about the validity of Constantine's conversion to Christianity. Um, I'm not really trying to draw attention to that debate or get people drawn into it, only to say that people like Eusebius of Caesarea and Lactantius wrote about um, Constantine's conversion, and there's something to be said about it. So if you want to haggle with sources, in terms of his conversion, go talk to Eusebius and Lactantius. They're the guys that are writing about it. At any rate, Constantine, of course, was a devotee of the Sol Invictus cult, and there's again endless debate as to you know how this may have played into the date of the celebration of Christmas as December the 25th. Now there are other earlier sources like Hippolytus that sort of hint to that date, but there's usually a lot of criticism leveled against um, Constantine for this. Um, I'll let you make up your own mind. You can dig into that if you want to. Um, Certainly, Constantine. We know that his triumphal arch was erected across from the Colosseum, where there was a statue of Sol. Um, we do know that again, his image is on the coinage of the period with the Sol Invictus. So we do know that he was a devotee of that. Now, as to this other stuff about the date of the date of Christmas and its conflation with Eastern cults, um, again, I'm not trying to start that debate here and add you know fuel to that fire. I'm just bringing you the nuts and bolts of the Sol Invictus cult and its general sort of context. Now, um, Constantine, also associated with the canonization of the Bible in terms of the not necessarily the Council of Nicaea proper that took place in 325, but a meeting of bishops that he commissioned in 331 to actually, you know, produce 50 copies of the canonized Bible. So he's an interesting and important figure in the history of Christianity. Uh, whether he was remained pagan and his conversion was, you know, a political act, that's between him and God. Uh, there's as a footnote to this, I'll just say that there's plenty of precedent in the Bible of God using pagans to carry out His work. Um, whatever Constantine's spirituality at the time, I personally believe as a Christian that God used him, put him there in that capacity to use him. Now, that's kind of a nutshell of the Sol Invictus cult. It's a very interesting uh, part of Roman culture and Roman religion towards the end of the Roman calendar. And, uh, you know, particularly in the later Roman Empire, the span of days that the Saturnalia was uh, celebrated in coincided with that of the Sol Invictus cult. So something to keep in mind if you're interested in the classics and it's December, um, interested in the Roman calends, then the Sol Invictus is definitely a celebration of the Sol Invictus in conjunction with the Saturnalia is really a worthwhile study in terms of Roman religion. So there you go. There is the Sol Invictus cult. And again, if you like the content, click a like, subscribe, and share. And I'll be seeing you soon. Godspeed.